What's up guys, welcome to another video. Now before I get into this video, I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who took part in last night's live show. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a great one, partly because it ignited so much passion amongst you guys, and I've just spent the last, I don't know, half an hour, 45 minutes going through as many of the comments as I can that were left underneath that video after it went out. And you know, they are angry comments, they are insightful comments, they're passionate comments, which is what I love. There's a lot of criticism for me and some of my views on that, which I will take. I've responded to some that I think have been unfair, but if you are fair in what you're saying about my opinions, that's absolutely fine. You know, these moments in our sport should divide opinion, and the fact that we get people talking for days after the event is just great. So I love that, so please keep it coming. Looking forward to the next show on Monday night. As I said in last night's show, I thought in today's video we'd take a bit of a deep dive look into the F1 race directors' event notes. Now that might not sound like a really interesting subject matter, but actually I think you'll be surprised. The event notes have formed a fairly central role in some key and controversial incidents recently, most notably, of course, and most recently at the Russian Grand Prix, where Lewis fell foul of Article 19 of the race director's notes, but also at Monza and other races. These have formed a central role in some big moments. We hear the commentators talking about them a lot, they get circulated to all of the teams, but we as fans, we rarely ever get to see them. So today I thought I'd look at the Russian Grand Prix event notes, go into detail of what they cover, what's included in them, why it's included, what role they play in the outcome of a weekend, and perhaps some interesting details that maybe you just didn't even know about. So let's have a look. I'll share my screen with you now. This is what they look like. Document 16 of this particular event. This is version 3, so it was updated on Saturday with some new features in it. The first version of these events always comes out, of these notes always comes out on a Wednesday or a Thursday morning. It's given to all of the teams, and then Thursday afternoon at the team managers meeting, these event notes are discussed by all of the teams. Any points of controversy are raised. Any questions that teams might have over the wording of some of these things can be raised and discussed in those meetings with Michael Massey, the race director himself. So let's look at the first page. First page just details essentially what's in the document. There's a pit lane map that I'll show you in a moment that shows you things like the position of the safety car lines, the timing lines, marshalling posts, where the allocation of each team's garage is, all of that kind of stuff. Fairly basic stuff, but important stuff. Where the trackside light panels are, displaying things like the marshalling system. Drivers need to be aware of that stuff, as we found out in Monza a few weeks ago. Pirelli's tyre information, things like the prescriptions that we always hear about, the minimum tyre pressures, minimum cambers, that's all detailed in this document too. Not allowed over the solid white line at pit lane exit, and if you do, it clearly says that you will be reported to the steward. So details like that are all noted in here, and they of course have to be very clearly communicated to the drivers. Even if some of this seems repetitive and common sense, the drivers have to be made aware of rules like this, because when it comes to the race, if they haven't been made aware, they will fall foul of these regulations and make a mistake. And I think it's fair to say that these are kind of things that have happened to Mercedes over recent races. You can see there, number 9, parc fermé cameras. Now, you may not even be aware of this, but back in my day, parc fermé between qualifying and the race used to happen by 6:30 on a Saturday evening. We'd have had to have finished any work we were doing on our cars post-qualifying. We then have to put all the bodywork on, push it down to the end of the pit lane to a parc fermé garage, big empty garage, where every team would push their car inside that garage, would put a cover on it, and then the garage would be locked up and sealed overnight until we were given the cars back on Sunday morning. Now, that's difficult to do at some places because they simply don't have the space to do it. So today, the FIA installs cameras inside every team's garage looking down at the two race cars so that they can monitor things that way. And the race director's notes here just clarify that those cameras, those FIA cameras, must remain uncovered and unobstructed for the entirety of the event. Now, it might seem obvious that, but if a team wheels a stack of tyres in or puts something up on a shelf that may block the view of that parc fermé camera, they will open themselves up to a penalty at some point in the event, because they may not have been up to no good with the car, but they have breached or not followed one of the race director's notes. So little tiny details that are buried in here are really, really important to the operation from a team perspective over the race weekend. Things like the curfew. There's a note here that says, for example, they've opened up the amount of time by which you can come in and out of the circuit around the curfew time to alleviate the social distancing problem. Previously, we had a cut-off time at curfew where teams were allowed back into the paddock on a Sunday morning, for example, and everybody would gather at the circuit gates, queuing, waiting to get in as the clock ticked over to open up the paddock, because everyone wants to get in and carry on with work. Well, that really is difficult to manage social distancing in that situation. So today, what they've done is they've opened that up for 30 minutes prior to the cut-off time to allow people to stream in at different times and alleviate that gathering at the circuit gate. Page 3 and 4, talks about changes to the circuit. So these are event-specific instructions for this circuit and this event. It talks about the curb, the orange dome curb behind the turn 4 exit has been reduced in length by approximately 1 metre. Now that might seem like not very much, but you communicate that to your race drivers and your engineers, and on a Thursday evening they will go out and they'll walk the circuit and they'll look at that orange curb at the exit of turn 4 and then maybe say, well look, that's been shortened by 1 metre, so maybe we could change our exit line. We might be able to change the driving line to take advantage of the fact that that's been shortened by 1 metre. And by going out and having a look at it, you might find a little advantage when you get in the car on Friday morning. So again, really useful information that shouldn't be glossed over. The weighing platform, the FIA weighing scales that you often see cars being pushed into or called onto by the FIA, you may not be aware that those scales are also open to the teams to use, but only for specific times during event, and they are detailed in this document. So the teams will be allowed between 11 AM on a Thursday to 10 AM on a Friday to openly go and use that FIA scrutineering garage for their own purposes, to weigh the car, to measure it on the flat patch in there, to make sure the team are comfortable that it's legal. But it also details that they're only allowed in there for a maximum of 10 minutes per car. That's not very long. I can promise you from experience, you are running around that car measuring every single detail to try and get it done within 10 minutes. If you breach that, you're open to a penalty because you didn't follow the race director's notes. 10 minutes might not sound like very long, but when you've got 20 cars queuing to get into that garage over the course of Thursday and Thursday afternoon, you can end up queuing for well over an hour, much longer than that if you're at the back of a long queue with everybody taking 10 minutes plus the changeover time in between. So these details are important. There's number 19 there, practice starts, detailing where practice starts can take place. Now, as I said, we've done that to death, but because perhaps Mercedes didn't take that seriously enough, perhaps they didn't put enough importance on that, and when Lewis threw that question at them, can I move further down the pit lane, they didn't really probably recognise that this was detailed in here, or they didn't recognise it enough and question to Lewis where exactly he wanted to do that pit lane start from. The lines or bollards at pit lane exit and entry, it will tell you where the bollards are and which side of those bollards you must go when you're coming in and out. Track limits, that's a big one, and that's, you can see there, heavily detailed in fluorescent pink because it's a brand new set of rules specific to this event and they need to be noted. These are changes to the document, perhaps from the first version that came out on the Thursday. Really important to follow those. Again, we saw in the race on Sunday, this formed a crucial part of what led into a number of penalties and drivers having to try and avoid that exit curb, go around those bollards at the exit of turn 2. A messy affair as it turned out, but it was all detailed in here, which is why they had to follow that. It outlines the pit lane speed limit and things like that as well. It talks about the light panels around the circuit. Now this was something that we saw in Monza, that again Mercedes, or particularly Lewis, just wasn't aware that there is a pit lane entry status light panel ahead of the pit lane entry. There are of course photos, as you can see here, detailing all the things that are mentioned in this document as well to make it very, very clear. Interestingly, at the Russian Grand Prix they did not have a photo of the practice start area. They gave a very vague description of where it should be, Everybody else knew where it was, apart from Lewis Hamilton, let's say, or Lewis pushed the limits to try and do it somewhere else. But what they didn't do, and they do sometimes do, is have a photo to make that unavoidably clear. So there's some of the photos that are included in this. Then we have a map of the circuit showing marshalling posts. Interestingly, these things also show where a car can be removed from the racetrack and where it cannot be removed from the racetrack. If you think back to Monza, when Magnussen pulled up next to a marshal's post and everybody said, why can't they just push it back through that marshalling post gap? Because that was not one of the designated areas for cars to be removed from the racetrack. It wasn't really a gap. It was big enough, probably just about, if they moved some of the stuff to squeeze a car through, but it wasn't one of the designated areas, which is why they then had to get marshals to push it into the pit lane, close the pit lane, and we know what followed. But it was all detailed in the race director's event notes. The map around showing you where safety car lines are, where the safety car will be based, all of that kind of stuff. And this is, again, all really important stuff that the team managers need to drill into their drivers ahead of the race weekend, because it's not inbuilt into a driver. These are race-specific event notes that need to be as familiar to you as the sporting regulations or the technical regulations when it comes to a race, because otherwise you can fall foul. And then finally, we've got Pirelli's prescriptions here detailing not just minimum tyre pressures and cambers that we kind of know about and hear about a lot, but it also details things like how long each tyre should be stored in a blanket, how long it should be heated at certain temperatures in these blankets. There are prescriptions for all of this stuff that Pirelli detail to the teams, and if they fall foul of those, they essentially void their warranty on those tyres. They don't follow the instructions, and therefore they open themselves up to potential penalty, and that can cost them very dearly in a race. So there you go, a number of things in there that I hope you might find interesting. The final map there is showing where photographers can be and they can't be around the circuit. So lots of information for lots of different people. Because we've heard so much about it recently, I thought I'd give you a shout and let you know what's in there. Well, I hope you found that interesting. If you did, give it a like and a thumbs up, and if you're not subscribed to the channel yet, please do. I'd really appreciate it. And I'll see you very soon. Ta-da. Is anyone else suffering this right now, with someone else in their household working from home incredibly loudly?